Hello, welcome to my little video. So I made a little program in C# to use for studying Russian. This is really just for my own personal use. It would not necessarily be useful for somebody else, especially because of the way I've set up my questions that I have in it. It's just for me to make memorizing vocabulary and sentences and things like that easier. A little bit about my inspiration and why I chose to do this. I was introduced to the program Anki from a book, and it's been several years ago. I think it was something like How to Learn Any Language and Never Forget, something like that. I can't even remember the name of the book now, but he mentioned Anki in it, and I started using it, and I really like it. And it's based on spaced repetition, which is pretty common. There's a lot of, that's kind of a buzzword now almost. It's talked about in a lot of places. And the original researcher that did the research to lay the groundwork for spaced repetition, he would memorize things, just random, I don't remember for sure what it was, but it was just like, say, numbers, or it wasn't anything with like real meaning. He was just memorizing like items basically, and he would time how long it would take him to forget, and then space out his reviews and kind of try to learn which spacing for reviewing worked the best, where he got the most, where he saw the best results for improvement in his memory. And the basic takeaway from his research was that you want to study something right before the moment when you're about to forget it, and because studying prior to that moment is a little bit unnecessary, and then studying after that moment, well, if you've forgotten it, you have to relearn it. Relearning is easier than learning, but it's still not as easy as reviewing. So the best moment is to study it right before you're going to forget it. And then the next thing, kind of like, I guess, the second principle from his research, was that you first start out with very small intervals, and the times probably vary from person to person. I've seen different things for his chart and I don't remember them, but say you memorize something, you go over the thing you want to memorize until you memorize it, say a vocabulary word or something like that, or a sentence, whatever the thing is you want to memorize. Then you sit it down for a short period of time, let's just say 10 minutes for now. Then after, if that's your optimal time for reviewing, you review it at 10 minutes. Then after you've successfully reviewed it at the 10-minute mark, now you should be able to wait longer, say 30 minutes. Then after you review it 30-minute mark successfully, then you can wait even longer. And this is the idea that Anki's built off of. The major problem is, like, they didn't really fit their program to the theory, because the shortest review time for them after you have learned something is an entire day, which is nowhere near what I remember seeing from the charts that have to do with that show that guy's results from his research. And anyway, it doesn't work for me. If I am trying to learn something new and I learn it, the next day when I go to review it, I have completely forgotten it. So I tried to make my own thing where I can just review it at my own leisure, kind of whenever I think is best. But I still like the idea of it presenting me with the questions. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this little program that I made. And here's some of my program. I guess I got my main program here, and I just put it all in one class. I'm not really a programmer by trade, but I just know enough to make something functional. So for me, for what I have right now, keeping it in one class works just fine, so that's what I did. I don't even think I used functions. It's been a little while since I wrote most of it, but yeah, I don't even think I used functions. It's just one straight shot. And then I have these sheets that where I created questions and answers, and my program runs through a sheet, and I have to type in the answer, and it checks my answer. So I can demonstrate real quick here. Once it loads. So, please choose from the following options. 1, the masculine conjugation chart. That's the initial page that I made. 2, the technology study sheet. Those are vocabulary words and phrases that I took notes on from from my lessons from my Russian tutor. Number 3, the Bible memory sheet. I'm trying to memorize verses in Russian. So far I only have 1 verse on that sheet. And then number 4 uses a random study sheet, so it just randomly chooses between one of the 3. Or ideally in the future I'll just keep adding more. So I'll choose number 1 for right now because that's the one that's made the best and the one that I know the best. And number 2, I'll choose number 2. Let's see what happens. I haven't even studied number 2 yet. Alright, this is just for my own purpose again. You are using the study sheet at index number 2. That just kind of so I can keep track of what's going on in the program, make sure I used it for debugging. This program will read a series of questions from a text file and ask your response. You are to enter the answer. You have 3 attempts for each question. So, because it was easier to program and because I'm a beginner programmer, my answers have to be typed exactly the way I recorded them on the answer sheet. So, capitalization, punctuation, all that stuff matters. And this first one again was also just a test question for debugging purposes. The answer to this one is answer. So it says Molodets, and it proceeds to the next question. Translate to leave into Russian. Hint, it's not uйти or uходить. I forgot my parenthesis there. Close parenthesis. So this one I actually don't know. I think it was something like покинуть. Oops. Maybe, I don't remember, покинуть or something. That's probably backwards. Кинуть. So I'll probably get it wrong. And when I do, it says try again. It gives me the same question again. I have 1 more attempt. I don't know what it is. So now this time, for me, for reviewing purposes, if I get it wrong a couple of times, clearly I don't know it and I need to be given the answer. So it tells me the answer right here. It's покидать, покинуть, and then it gives me the opportunity to type that in because I learn better by doing. So покидать. I don't know if my pronunciation's correct. Покинуть. Молодец. And the next question. Had I got that wrong, I'll show you on this one. If I get it wrong 3 times, it just moves on to the next question. So now question 4. That's pretty much all it does. This particular file is incredibly long. It's not. That's why I haven't gone through it yet. It needs work before it's actually usable. So I would show you to the end. It just exits the program when it's done. I'm not gonna. I'll open up another one and show you. So let's run it again. I want number 3, but let's see if I get lucky if I type 4. And no, it gave me the number 2 again. So answer, it's this one. And I don't want to see number 2. So, but you saw when I hit number 4, it just randomly gave me one of 1 through 3, and it would keep doing that. And as I add more in, I have it set up so that it will automatically just give one of them from the position 1 through position 3, or position 1 to the second to last position. Just show you real quick what happens when it ends, which I can do with number 3 because it's really short. So, oh, okay, well it's not as short as I remembered. I forgot I had it do it in reverse order, starting from the end to the beginning, 1 word at a time. So we're going to write out Genesis 1:1 in reverse, word by word, no capitalization except the word God. Write the last word. It was землю. I think it's и землю. Небо и землю. Землю. Let's just get one wrong real quick. The correct word, Bog nieba I zemlyu, and I could type it, Bog nieba I zemlyu, and it will say молодец. Let's say I didn't know what the next word was. It's satvaril, so it should be satvaril Bog nieba I zemlyu. And let's say that I messed up somewhere in typing it. It'll again just go on to the next question. And this is the main reason that these would not be useful for somebody who currently, the way I have it, it's not intended for other people. I already know what's supposed to be on the sheet, so had I not already memorized it a little bit to begin with, it would be very difficult to learn it, learn something just from the beginning with my little program. But that's not my purpose for it right now. My purpose for it is just so that I can review the things I'm trying to commit to memory. Prior to this should be Nachalya. Nachalya satvaril Bog nieba I zemlyu. And the first word, v, except no capitalization, v nachalya, satvaril Bog nieba I zemlyu. And then now, because I wasn't paying attention to capitalization or punctuation in the first part, I have in the last little piece I request that it's wrote out all the way from start to end with capitalization and punctuation. So, oops, Nachalya satvaril Bog nieba I zemlyu. Period. Punkt. And then that's it. So it quits. I can push any key as it says or close it. So that's a demonstration, and kind of maybe run through a little bit. I don't remember now when I first created this which one it did. I think when I first created it, I think it already had using system. It already created a namespace for me, which was the name of my file. And I feel like it probably already created the class too, which is why I think I don't remember if I added that or not. But anyway, so maybe kind of just a little rundown, just randomly explaining the stuff that I see in here. Using system, so my program is going to be using whatever is in the system. I guess these are still header files in C#. I've not taken a formal class on C#. In C++, they're header files. I'm assuming they are here, so I'm going to call it header file. So using system, that header file, using system.io, and I ended up looking that up when I was trying to read my files that I created where my questions are. So this header file using system.io was needed for the method file.readLines, which I needed to read the lines from whichever file I'm opening, and it stores each one of those lines in an array. Namespace arrays, and this is the date when I first started it, and that was a month ago. So kind of have a lot of plans for what I want to do in the future, but it's meant to be functional, so I just created it so that I could go through the first sheet that I made, which I didn't even go over just now, but it's a grammar sheet on masculine case endings. And once I got it done, I just used it to study for quite a while before I made any more changes to the program. Static void main, you need the main method, and this should be, again, my background for my class that I took was C++, but should be where the program enters, or where the compiler enters the program. Where it begins is wherever you put the main method. So past, the header files are compiled first. I'm assuming it's the same for C#, and then this is where my coding actually begins to be compiled. Console.output encoding equals system.text.encoding.unicode. This is required because the Cyrillic alphabet is not in the ASCII character set, which is the standard for For Visual Studios on Windows, which is what I'm using, and so I needed to change the encoding to Unicode so that my console could use the Cyrillic alphabet, and that's pretty key since my whole purpose for creating this was to study Russian, so that was required, and the same here for the input encoding. So input and output can both use Unicode. This is actually my most recent change was adding this menu so that I could have more than one sheet to study from. And as you saw in my little demonstration, this here just writes out everything that you saw to the screen. Bunch of console.write lines, write the line to the console, and then console.readline, and convert the response to an integer, because in C# anyway, the read line automatically stores it as a string. Pretty sure about that, pretty sure that's the way it works, but so you have to convert it to whatever's read to an integer, because I wanted it as an integer when I use it later on in the program. String selected file. So I had to put, what did I have to do this? This I use later. This was just a placeholder for the logic that I use to choose which file to open. I created this placeholder, selected file. This is for use later. This actually isn't doing anything yet. I'm gonna eventually have it so that I can not go through my questions in order, but currently it only goes through the questions in order. But later I started to work on that a little bit just by creating this Boolean variable, where I'm gonna have the user will be able to choose before studying, but after seeing which sheet they get to study from, whether they want to do the sheet in order or in random order, or maybe also I might also add reverse order. I want to do it after the sheet is shown, because my sheets are going to be very different in nature, and some won't make any sense to do in reverse order, such as the one you saw where I was trying to memorize that verse of the Bible. Each question just says add the next word. Well, that's not going to do any good if you do it in out of order. And I could sit there and say add the 5th word or the 7th word, but it kind of just is not really my goal with that, so that one I will just always study in order. Let's see. File names. So this was yeah, I created this as an array to hold each of the strings that I need, that are each of the names of my files. So unfortunately I don't know if I'll come up with an easier way to do this later, but for right now, each time I create a new sheet I have to manually add the path. I suppose I should have blocked out my path there, but my path to my sheet, so that way when I try to open the file later on it can find it. And here is my little section of code, the logic that goes with the menu. So I chose to use a for loop. I was going to do a switch statement at first, but I had issues. It just wasn't really working out for me. I was having a hard time getting it to adding the file opening part into the switch statement. I don't know if it's possible or not. I was having trouble doing it, so I just switched to doing it based on some more basic principles that I got to work. So just a for loop. And what the for loop does here is it just goes through, it iterates through all of the index positions in my array for however many positions there are. That's this array up here, sheet list, which will be the manually updated by me list of all of the sheets that I have to study from. And it cycles through that list, and it says if the user selection, which was stored up here into user selection, equals convert to int32 console.readline. So it reads the line and converts it and stores it in user selection. So down here in my logic it says if the user selection equals the the sheet.listLength do this part down here, which is going to be the random, because I'm always going to keep my random choice in my list. This up here, the menu will also have to be manually updated every time I add a new sheet, and I'm going to keep it so that the last one, which currently here is the fourth, maybe I could change that from a 4 so I don't have to change the number every time, but anyway, it will always be the last one. So in my logic down here, I'm saying, you know, if the last item in there, or whatever the length is, if that is equal to what the user selected, then you're going to do this bit of logic here, and this bit of logic is going to create the random number to use for opening the sheet. It's going to randomly choose which index position to open. So variable random equals new random, int random selection equals random.next, which I just looked this up on Google, or it came from somewhere, probably Stack Overflow or something. And this is our starting value. So I don't want it to do 0. I have an index position 0 and it is a blank, because when I didn't have that, an error popped up. When I do, what was it? Something that I had later, it ended up where you have it open up nothing. Oh, okay, that's what it is. I wanted to add a catch if I inserted an invalid number, that it would say, hey, you inserted an invalid number, and it still was requiring that I open a sheet. So I added, I just created index 0 as a blank sheet, so that for that purpose, so that if I enter an invalid number and it says, hey, you entered an invalid number, I don't have to make it open up one of the sheets that has text on it. It opens up a blank sheet instead, and then immediately closes the program. So selected file equals sheet list random selection. So up here we created the random selection number, integer. Down here we're saying that random selection integer is the index position of sheet list that is going to be used for selected file. So then selected file is going to end up equaling whatever text was pulled up. Console.writeLine, the study sheet has been chosen randomly. Again, this is for my debug purposes. Well, it's for debug purposes, and also it's going to probably be useful later on when I want to choose whether to mix up the order of my questions or keep them in the order that I created them in. Just add a space and break from my loop, from my for loop here, because otherwise it would keep printing out. It ends up printing this thing 4 times or something. It ended up printing something 4 times, and or however many times. Currently it runs through 4 times because my length is 4. So it ended up printing out whatever it was printing out 4 times instead of once. So that's why I added this break here. Else if, I don't think it would have did it here. It should have just did it, like, say down here. Say if my value was 2, it's going to run through this, and yeah, I don't know, I can't think about it well enough to talk about it on the fly, but else if user selection equals I, so it's going to just run through each iteration and look to see if what the user entered is equal to one of my sheets, and if it doesn't hit anything here, then it'll find it at the last position, hopefully. If it doesn't find it at the last position, it'll find it down here in my else if, and throw out my error, which is on my blank sheet. Is it blank? No, that's where I actually put the error code. The error, well, I don't know if code's really the right word, but where I put the error, where it prints out the error message. And otherwise, say that it is one of the normal sheets. It'll print out which sheet is being used. It'll say you are using the study sheet at index number, and whatever index position it is, that's the number that'll go with it. And then that's pretty much it for selecting the file, which that's what I did just most recently. I added all of that code, quite a bit actually, all the way from here down to here, so that it could contain multiple sheets. Then this down here was the original code where it just opens whatever sheet I'm trying to open. So my string array cards equals, because this is something I'm going to use later on in the logic, file.readAllLines, selected file. So whatever file name path, whatever file path got chosen up here, it oh, I lost my place here. Where do we go? There it is. Whatever file path was chosen will end up being here. It will open that file and it will read all the lines from that file. I think if I remember right, it probably closes the file right afterwards too. You could look that up. I don't remember. It's not important for my purposes. So and then what it does is each line of my sheet gets stored one at a time into a new index position in my array. So like if we look at, well, this one's nice and short. If we looked at this one, index position 0 should be, if I'm understanding correctly and remembering correctly, this line right here will be index position 0. Then this line right here will be index position 1. And the same for the other ones, except they're many, many lines long. So that's what this does. It basically sets up my array that I'm going to use for my quiz program. My array is called cards, and it's of type string. So console.write line. Now you've I should probably move this. This was made before there was more than one file to open, but here's the instructions for answering the questions that are going to get printed out to the user. And then here's the bit of logic that I made for it, which is actually much shorter. This short little bit here is actually the quiz logic, and I haven't looked at this in a month, but let's see. For some reason I set j equal to 1. I think I did that because it came up with an error if I didn't somewhere later on. And so I have another for loop, and okay, this is kind of, so I'm starting at position 0. I'm setting I equal to 0, and I'm going from when I is less than cards.length minus 1. The reason for that minus 1 there is because basically because I'm counting by threes, and I wanted it to cut off, be sure that it cuts off without trying to do one extra, you know. I just made it one less because I don't need it to count. I'm not really concerned with every position in there, just anyway, I'm not explaining it very well. So it's cards.length minus 1, and then the increment, what did I say? Yeah, so I'm taking I and I'm adding 3 to it. And so we're counting by threes basically, because that way my sheets are set up so that every first line is my question, the second line is my answer, the third line is blank for my own readability, and then the fourth line will begin the next question. So every 4 actually. Anyway, whatever, count. Yeah, so this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, multiples of 3. So all of the multiples of 3 are the beginning of a new question. That's how I set it up. And let's see. I created something called incorrect attempts. This was so that after, it just doesn't let you keep on writing something wrong forever, which since I had to give the right answer, I probably don't need this, but originally it didn't even give the right answer, and so I didn't want to just have to keep getting stuck on the same question because I didn't know what the answer was and then never going on. So that's why it tracks the number of incorrect answers, incorrect responses. There's just this, I had to print out a space between the responses. Yes, no, between, anyway, it prints out a space between somewhere. So user response equals 0. Off the top of my head, I don't remember why I had that there. correct response equals cars I plus 1. So this is saying that the correct response, oh yeah, because I just initialized the variable, that's what I did. So the user response will be whatever the user types in. I just initialized it to the string value of 0. And the correct response will be whatever is my index position plus 1, because the correct response is always the next line after the question. Question, it's not really a question, but it's a command or a question. Then correct response, question, correct response, and so on. So then I created a do while loop, and after I initialized my incorrect attempts to 0, I initialized my user response to the string value of 0, and I set my correct response equal to the position after the current question that I'm on. And then I say console.writeLine. Oh, that's why I did that. This is to count. J equals 1 because I'm using the 1. The J value is the question number. So I don't know if you noticed, I had it when I ran it, my program. I could just show you real quick. Let's go ahead and do number 1, which you haven't seen. So see how this is question 1. If I enter an incorrect response, it still says question 1. I have it keeping the question numbers consistent. Then whenever it moves on to a new question, the new number pops up. So now this is question 2. If I were to go, that's going to take a while for me to type out actually, so we'll just enter it wrong again. Question 3, like that. So that's why J is set to 1 up here initially, because I want to start with the number 1, and then down here it will write J. So say if it's on the first iteration, it'll write the number 1, and then it'll leave a tab afterwards, and the it increments at the end of the do part. So if I increment, wait, J++, something doesn't sound right about that. Incorrect attempts. Anyway, I don't think very well on the fly. So console.writeLine cars I. So now I'm going to print out the I position is my question. So basically I'm writing the question that is stored in my I index position. Then I'm setting the user response equal to whatever the user types in. Then I'm saying that if the user response equals the correct response, then we're going to say молодец, which means good job. I'm going to leave this little funny little spaces to kind of separate the questions a little nicer. And I'm going to increment the J value because clearly we're done with, say it was question 1. If I was 1, we're done with question 1. So we want to increment the J value because we're going to move on to question 2, which will be I 4. Yes, 0, no, 3, which will be I 3 because we start with 0. So that's why J is a separate value from I. That's just how I did it. There's other ways to do it I can even think of right now. I probably could have kept using the I variable and subtracted 3 from I, but I didn't do that. I created a separate variable called J. So that's if the response is correct. Now if the response is incorrect and we have not reached our max number of attempts yet, which is changeable in the program. Actually, I should have made this a variable. Now that my program is getting longer, I should have made this a constant at the top, so that way I could change it really easily without having to dig through and find this number inside here in the logic. But if the incorrect attempts is less than 2, which is what I set for my max, so it's actually 3 because we start at 0. So the 0, then the first, then the second, and wait, somehow it's 3. Again, I'd have to sit down and work through it. I can't do it on the fly. But if my incorrect attempts is less than 2, then go ahead here and do this. If my response is not correct and my incorrect attempts is not less than 2, so I'm over the max. Then what I'm going to do is, now that makes sense to me why the j increments there, I'm going to go ahead and take my incorrect attempts and increment it. I don't know why that's there actually. I don't think that needs to be there, but I'm going to leave it. Then I'm going to increment my j value because I'm moving on to the next question because I've already exhausted my guesses, and I'm going to break from my do while loop so that I can get back up to my start of the next iteration of my for loop. But going back to this right here, else if section where I was incorrect in my attempt, however, I've not yet exceeded my maximum number of attempts, then I can, I'm not sure why I put, okay, if it equals 1, and the reason that I did this is because so the first time will be a 0. So if it's 0, then that means it doesn't equal 1. Then I don't want to print out the correct response yet. I just want to give another chance to guess, especially because it was probably a typo, or there's a good chance that I had 2 different ideas in my mind about what the response was, and I want to give myself a chance to write out the second thought that I had in my mind or correct my typo before giving the actual answer. So it skips this if it's my first failed guess, and it just prints out try again, and it increments the incorrect attempts counter. Now next time through it will this will equal 1, and so it will go ahead and also print out the correct response, which you'll notice, I don't know if you could tell when I ran the program, this does not stand out very well. I should do something in the future to make it stand out better, but again, it's really just for me, and even though it doesn't stand out well, I know to look for it, so it's not really a big deal. Yeah, so basically that's it, and then I just have some lines at the end because I think it makes it easier to read. I like the space between the end of my program and all of the stuff that Visual Studio prints out at the bottom when your program's done executing but it hasn't yet closed the window. I've got some ideas, lots and lots of ideas for future changes. I think I've made this video long enough, so I guess I probably won't go over them right now, but eventually I've done some stuff with Unity. I may actually make this a little more visually appealing by throwing it into Unity. I think that will look a lot nicer and work really nice if my stuff that I'm trying to study ever includes graphics instead of just text, which is pretty likely. Currently, obviously, I'm pretty limited on what I can do with graphics, especially for trying to come up with a response. Ideally, although this is pretty far away from my ability, I would like to have it strictly audio, or not even like strictly audio, but say have sheets, for example, that are strictly audio, where I could have a native speaker record the question or prompt or command or whatever I have at the initial, like say side A of the flashcard, if we're using the flashcard analogy, and then also have the native speaker record the side B or response as well.